super busy, which is why he hasn't been on the chat here recently very much, and we miss him. He's an amazing guest, and it's really good to have him.
Thank you.
And it's kind of like the old saying, Jose, right? If you want something done, go ask a busy person, right? And they'll figure out a way to get it done. And you are a busy dude, my man. So if you're new to the chat, this is a fun thing that we do every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time in Loveland, Colorado, which is where I'm at. 10 a.m. Eastern in beautiful southern Florida, where Jose is at. And we talk all things food safety. And if you're new, a couple of things here that we've kind of built into this tradition is in the chat, let us know where you're at in the world. It's always amazing. And you'll notice too that this is not a presentation. This is a discussion. So we'll pick a topic and I'll bring an expert on the show like Jose, and we will talk about that topic. So it's an amazing opportunity to get questions answered in the food safety field. Because one of the things that we strongly believe, I know that Jose believes this as well, is that food safety is not a point of competition. We're all in this together. So when a big recall happens, like, oh, I don't know, big Olaf down there in Florida for listeria and ice cream, that we're all in this together, right? So if you're an ice cream manufacturer, you could have the best systems in the world, but in the minds of the consumer, you're part of that. So we need to work together to make sure that everybody's doing a great job. So Renee, my esteemed assistant, is on the line to help guide the conversation and shepherd questions. So Renee is amazing. So it's good to see you here this morning, my friend, as well. So we've got Tom is here this morning. Good to see you. Awesome. All right. So Ryan's in sunny Wisconsin. Hopefully the weather's holding out nicely. It's been interesting. So this time of year in Colorado is an interesting time, Jose, because we get monsoons. So it'll be very hot during the day. And then in the afternoon, rain clouds will roll in and you'll get some brief showers and then they go out. And that pattern just keeps repeating, which is kind of nice. It helps to break the afternoon heat. Now, when I say heat, it's nothing compared to what you're used to down there.
Well, let me tell you that over here, we are getting into the 90-something temperature-wise. But then if you include the humidity, you're reaching the 100s.
Oh, yeah. It's like, you go outside for a little bit and you're like, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm done.
This morning was 83% humidity.
Oof. No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Let's see. So who else we have on the line here? So we've got John in the UK. Welcome. Julie. And of course, our friend Austin. Annie is on from Maryland as well. Good to see Annie. It's always good to see her face. I see these little pictures in, the little pictures from people's profiles in the stream, and it's good to see those smiling faces. So today, Jose, I almost did it. Everybody, please join us.
I have mine.
A drink of your favorite beverage. Wonderful. Got my nice coffee. I bought a bag of Moroccan mint tea off of Amazon for like $15. I'm like, oh, okay. You should see this. This is giant. I couldn't drink this in my lifetime. Bag of tea. So I was like, oops. Oh well, but it was a good deal for $15. So more mint tea for me here later on. Wanda, good morning. Mario, in Guadalajara. Wow, nice. Excellent.
Hola Mario, buenos días.
So let's take a look at our topic today here. So when Jose and I were preparing for this, so of course, right, supplier approval and all the processes for this and how you do that. We're looking at that. We're like, let's kind of look at this from a slightly different angle, right? Because again, Jose, one of the things that we see time and time again, right? And if you follow me on locals and you see the recalls on this, and Renee will put the link for this, by the way, it's free. Foreign supplier verification. Every single week, people are getting dinged for this because they don't understand the requirements of FSVP. Then we'll kind of talk about that a little bit, but it's really how do you manage, right? So kind of the story I was thinking about, right, is you've worked up the nerve, you've asked the pretty girl you like to the prom. Okay, now what? Right now you need to manage it and the process and all these type of things, right? And in quality, that can be really, really hard. And So part of this is, and I compile some questions of this. I can't wait to get Jose's opinions on these things, and of course, everybody on the chat as well. Wow, we got a great crowd here today. So John's getting ready for wine o'clock in the UK. I'm a little jealous. I'll follow you here later today. Cheryl, of course, in Chicago. Always good to see Cheryl. And a new person I don't recognize here from Nigeria. And Desia, I'm sure I'm absolutely slaughtering your first name. I apologize for that. Veterinary medicine. Nice. Very nice. So part of this, right, is, and Jose, right? So I've worked in industry for a long time, and there was something that would just drive me nuts is when people come into your office with a crisis, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Oh my God, product is on hold. Oh my God, we had a line problem. Oh my God, we need a new supplier. And it's like, we need to approve them immediately. And you're just like, okay, well, and now you've got to go back and unpack all of that type of information. And the bottom line here is there is a very small window of opportunity. The saying I would give to my quality managers is the best time for us to ask for information is before the check is given to them, right? Because once you give the check to the supplier, information gets harder to find.
Yes. Yes. So look at this, Bryan. When I was reading the notes, I thought, well, I mean, these notes are great, of course, for this, for this conversation, for this chat. However, I believe that we need to start, and you know me, I'm going to start by talking about the law, talking about the regulations, and then talking about systems. Okay. So let me go to the law first, even before regulation. Let me go to the law. What's in the law? Well, we have one thing that for sure is something that we need to comply with. It's a must. It's not well, let me see if I can do it or not. It's a must. And the law in the section of the Prohibited Acts says that in the case for suppliers, I'm going to focus on this one, says that companies cannot receive any product that is adulterated or misbranded because that is a prohibited act that will make you people criminals.
Right.
So what is one of the tools that companies are using in order to comply with these requirements? Well, the approved supplier program. Mm-hmm. Making sure that you somehow understand what your suppliers are doing in order to try, because this is where things are getting, tricky, to try to make sure that you're going to be sending you products that are clean and safe.
Absolutely.
So that's how we start. Now, let me start talking about systems. Okay. So in a system, you have ways to control things and ways to verify things. And whenever you design a control, you need to validate the control to make sure that it's going to work. Fine. And then we arrive to the element of the system that is called approved suppliers. Mm-hmm. Okay. So who's the one that is manufacturing? Your supplier. So does that mean that who's the one that is controlling? Oh, your supplier, not you. Oops, you have a big problem. Because now it's not up to you. It's not up to your approved supplier program. It's up to your supplier to make sure that whatever is being received is actually in full compliance with its own specification, assuming that your supplier is knowledgeable about what is a good way to put specifications in place. Lately, I have been reading specifications, and they're just terrible, one worse than the other one. So how can you determine if your product is or not in compliance with its own specification if the specifications are terrible?
Right.
And then the last portion of this approved supplier specification, and then the last item is the receiving procedure. When people are receiving, it's not opening the doors of the truck and then pulling the product out. No, that's secondary. The primary thing is to make sure that the products are coming from those suppliers that were approved, mm-hmm. and that the products are in full compliance with the specifications that belong to each of those ingredients or raw materials that are being purchased.
Right. And part of this, and the reason I think this conversation today is so important, Jose, is, and you've hit on a bunch of important topics here, right? Is one of the things that you hear us talk about on the chat a lot is There's systems and processes, there's the law, and then there's people, right? And the supply side of thing is extremely reliant on people. And we're seeing this now through all of these weird supply chain things that are going on. So for example, sunflower oil. Did I know that most sunflower oil came from Ukraine before the crisis? No. Do I know that now? Oh yeah, I know that now. And my clients know that really, really well.
Yeah.
And part of this, right, is when these type of situations happen, this is why you need good systems in place before this thing happens. Because if you have systems in place of how you approve suppliers, how you manage a relationship, how you look at the spec sheets, right? Because I agree with you. Most of the spec sheets I see are not spec sheets, or sales sheets. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I need a spec sheet. I need to understand the microbiological limits, the chemical, the physical hazards, where it's manufactured, your certificate, right? All these things. And part of this, right, is when a company is in crisis mode, you're not the only company, right? So if I have a client who needs sunflower oil for their products, guess what? There's lots of other companies that need sunflower oil too. And so now they're like, oh my God, where do I find sunflower oil? And so they go to the procurement group and they say, you find sunflower oil. And they're like, right? And so they're just calling everywhere. And who are these people that they're talking with, right?
Yep.
And sure, okay, so the procurement group gets a hold of somebody and they're like, hey, do you have sunflower oil? It's like, oh yeah, sure, we have sunflower oil. We'll 100% super duper awesome sunflower oil. It's only twice the market price of what you're currently paying. Okay, send me over information. I want to buy it now, right? And then they come to us in food safety and quality and say, oh, hey, here's this new thing we need. And you're like, whoa, what do you mean? Hold on a minute here. And I was having a conversation with a client here just recently and said, okay, well, we'll get some pre-shipment samples. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. What makes you think the pre-shipment sample is going to be the actual sample of what we're getting?
Yep.
And they went, oh, right. And that gets back to the people side, right? If you are dealing with people you do not know and you don't know how trustworthy they are, boy, oh, you're hanging yourself out there, right? You're opening yourselves to all kinds of risk.
And Bryan, the other thing is that, in my opinion, okay, but I believe that purchasing people should be a branch of the food safety team.
Oh, yeah.
Because what you're going to be purchasing, oh my goodness, you're purchasing ingredient. Do they understand approved supplier? Do they understand specification? Do they understand, what is a safe and what is not a safe product and so on?
Yeah.
That's something.
Right. And generally, right, when I work with procurement, right, I look at it as a two-step process. It's okay, great. You need to do what you need to do in procurement, right? What's the pricing? What's the availability? What's the port of entry? Where is it coming from? All the things procurement needs to know, which is great. But in order to save time, I'll put in front of them some questions that they need to ask right up front. It's like, okay, are you registered with FDA? Do you have a food safety plan? I want to see it. Are you Gfsi certified? That would be nice, right? A few questions, right? And if this supplier comes back and starts saying, what? No, we don't have any of that. Do you want this or not? Ooh, okay, this is probably not the person we want to buy to. This is somebody who's they're looking to make a quick buck, right? That's what they're looking for.
So the other thing is that I saw, Bryan, when you were talking, that Gary mentioned in the chat that, well, you go and audit your suppliers. And I'm going to say, for big companies that they do have the budget, Gary, to do that, great. I'm not going to say no. An audit is a great tool in order to make sure that your suppliers are actually somehow doing something good. Now, I was auditor for 9 years. So my next question is going to say, fine, who's the auditor? What is the experience of that auditor? Okay. How much that auditor knows about a system and how to use the 7 principles of the HACCP in that system, how they apply. Okay. What is going to be the checklist of that auditor? Because if you use a checklist of the regulation, you're going to be auditing certain things that are not part of the Gfsi. And if you use a Gfsi checklist, you're going to be auditing certain things that are not part of the requirements of the regulation. So I agree with the audit point. I believe that is great. I believe that is an excellent tool. but it will be up to the team, and I'm going to say the food safety team of the company, to determine which are the most important programs in that system and which are the specific requirements from regulatory standpoint and from GFSI standpoint, and then use that as your tool for auditing your suppliers. But yes, presence, being there, seeing what they do, oh, absolutely. This is the best way.
Right. But, right, and I'll throw a but on this, is resources are limited, right? So when I worked in the past at a large dairy company, we had over 6,000 different things we were buying in our systems. I can't audit all that. There's no way, right? So you have to be resourceful, and you have to think about what are the important things. And that's really kind of what our conversation is about today. It's not the mechanics of auditing. It's how do you decide who to audit and who do you invite into your company, right? Because you're partnering with these people. And part of this is understanding that people side of things, of who are these people and how is this relationship going to develop over time. There's a past company I worked for. We were looking at buying a new ingredient from the Philippines. And of course it was like, oh my gosh, we need this material right away. And they sent over documentation and these type of things. Like, okay, well, that's a good start. And I start looking at the documentation and I'm like, all right, I have questions. So we got the owner of the company on the phone and I started asking him questions about the documentation. And about halfway through, he stopped me and he said, okay, listen, Bryan, I understand these questions that you're asking me, but I hired a local student from the local university to write this documentation for me because I want to do business in the US. And I went, oh, right. So he understood what he needed to do, but he didn't understand the why he needed to do it. So guess what that meant? I mean, to Gary's point, right? I ended up going to the Philippines to visit the supplier. And was what he's saying, what was his company saying and doing, did that match? No, it did not, right? Nope. So that's very, very important, right? Yep. So part of this gets back into our topic, right? So procurement comes into the office of QA and says, oh my goodness, we have this crisis. We need this material right away. So you have to start asking some questions around the lines of, okay, tell me more. We'll get to Gary's comment here in a second. So I then started asking questions. Okay, why? Why do we need to make this change? Tell me more about what's going on here. How quickly does this need to be made? How wide is it going to be in the company? Are we going to have time to trial this in different products and these type of things? Because within any company, right, there's routine activities that take place. You know, we need to update contracts and these type of things. And then there's emergencies, right? So a supplier comes back and says, hey, that thing we've been supplying, right? Sunflower oil or what have you, we can't do that anymore. Sorry, right? And now the company risked being shut down.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing, Bryan, is that I made a quick summary for me just to keep in mind what I'm going to be discussing. And I believe that it's very important to notice certain things that are differences between, and I'm going to say FDA. Most likely, this is also applicable to FSIS, GFSI. So I went, well, I'm an instructor. I know that by memory. The definition of a supplier, according to the FDA, is any company that is manufacturing or processing, any farm that is raising animals, any farm that is growing crops. That's a supplier according to the FDA. Now, according to GFSI, the GFSI definition in the glossary, GFSI glossary, okay, so this is applicable to all of the schemes benchmarked. It says, is an entity from whom the audited site purchases raw materials, ingredients, products, or services. And as you can tell, if you are, let's say that we are, for example, Cisco, US Foods, okay? And we are selling these products. Are we processors, manufacturers, raising animals, or growing food? No. So what that means, that according to GFSI, if you're purchasing something from US Foods, oh yeah, you need to approve US Foods. But guess what? According to the FDA, you cannot approve US Foods. You need to go to the company that manufactured the product and go, and skip, let's say skip in quotes, US Foods, and then make sure that you audit that guy. Okay, that company. That's a huge difference. And the other thing is that when you are checking your suppliers, there is one thing that is very unique. So it is a prohibited act to receive any product that is adulterated or misbranded. Okay, let's focus for a second on adulteration. Let's say that you manufacture a product that the product is perfectly safe. You can eat it. You are not going to get sick. No illness. No nothing. However, the product contains a little piece of hair. According to the definition of adulteration, that product is adulterated. And it's very simple because you can only make food with food items. And the food items that are present in your food can only be those that are part of your product specification. So is hair food? No, cannot be present. The product is adulterated. The thing is that when you look at the definition for approving suppliers, we're normally looking at the safety side and not at the clean side. So for that reason is when people are responsible to identify which are the hazards that could be present in the product that you are purchasing from that supplier. And the thing that I have seen a lot, especially between last year and this year, when I'm helping people developing these programs, is that I'm going through the hazard analysis and I'm going to start identifying certain hazards. And then I'm going to say, okay, so now we need to know if these hazards are present in the hazard analysis of your supplier. And when at the times when we have the opportunity to read the other one, they don't have it. So how can they be controlling something that is in your plan and is not in their plan?
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right. And that circles back to questions, right? Is okay, procurement, who are you talking to? Right. Oh, well, there's a distributor in California. Okay, that's nice. Who is the company? Who's the manufacturer? What is the plant? Where's their food safety plan? Right. And so a lot of times, right. And so I think brokers and distributors, they're getting better, but they still don't understand in a lot of situations their role in food safety, right? If they're representing a company, they need to be gathering this documentation, right? They can improve their processes and their sales and move things a lot quicker if they have all these things already.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Now, the other note that I have here, the approval of the suppliers, according to the FDA, depends on their performance. And I want to use this word because this is how it is exactly defined in the regulation. According to the performance of this supplier against applicable regulations to their products and their processes. How do you approve suppliers according to Gfsi? Well, whenever the supplier is in compliance with some kind of a Gfsi standard, you can approve them. Well, the thing is that the requirements in Gfsi and the requirements of the FDA are not the same. And I'm going to make sure that I'm clear on this. There are a lot of things that are overlapping. Yes, there are a lot of things, but not everything is exactly the same because you have FDA and Gfsi requires, you need to have an approved supplier program. Both of them, they have that. Now, read the details. How do you approve a supplier according to the FDA? According to their performance against the regulations applicable to their products and the processes. That is not the requirement exactly in Gfsi.
Right. Absolutely. And I think part of this, right, is so there's a conversation going on in the chat here relative to different topics. But I think the overall theme here, right, is trust, right? Who do you trust, right? It's very different buying a material from a supplier you dealt with for 20 years versus somebody you do not know, right? And you need to take that accordingly. So Gary had made a comment here earlier saying, oh my goodness, 600 suppliers, you have to audit. Nobody can audit 6,000 suppliers, nobody, right? So can you imagine the army of people? No company is going to do that, right? So, okay, great. How do you manage that? right? So you have a baseline of materials, and you have to look at things according to risk, right? This gets back to telling your story, right? Is what are those raw materials I use in my process that are strategically important? What are those raw materials that are proprietary that I'm making specifically for my products? What are the things that I use everywhere, right? And of course, then overlaying that with what things are risky, right? So to Gary's point, right? Am I going to evaluate salt at the same level as I do something else? No, right? Do I need basic documentation and understanding to make sure that they're a good supplier? Yes. Am I going to send an auditor every year to go visit the salt supplier? No, right? Nobody can do that, right? So a lot of times you have to make these choices. And the way I explain it to my team is that FDA does the same thing, right? So if I'm the regional director at FDA and I need to figure out who I'm going to audit over that quarter, I don't audit everybody. Of course not, right? I don't have the resources, never in a million years. So I look at that and say, okay, what are the risky ones? Okay, I need to go to visit the ready to eat people. I need to go visit the high risk suppliers to make sure things are going okay. I need to follow up on past issues to make sure that those people are now compliant. I need to keep up on trends on new risks of what's going on in the industry. Giant recall going on right now in the aseptic space, right? Of Coronabacter of all things. And so FDA is looking at this. Now, my guess on that recall is that's linked in with what's going on in the infant formula, right? So FDA is paying attention to those things. So Cortland salt, is it sodium chloride or potassium? Yeah, I'm just using a general term there, the general thing. So part of this, right, and that's the topic around here, right, is there's these layers that you're going through for food safety, right? And Jose is correctly identifying that first one, right, which is regulatory compliance, right? Where does this fit within the standards of misbranding and adulteration? And then you look at the standards relative to food safety and GFSI and FSMA and all these type of things, right? Because under FSMA, right, supplier management, FSVP, all these type of things, that's a preventive control, right? So you need to manage that accordingly.
Actually, if you look at the regulation, Bryan, the FSVP, FSVP is asking people to develop and implement verification activities whenever the hazard analysis identifies that there is a hazard and that you need to approve the supplier. But they are being called verification activities. Now, if you take the preventive control for human food, in chapter number 12 of that class, there is a section for supply chain preventive controls. The verification activities are exactly the same. And that section is kind of a copy and paste from FSVP.
Yeah, exactly. So it's getting this viewpoint then of, okay, what's the picture, right? Why is this important to the company? How critical is it to the company? Where does this rank in terms of food safety? And then you can begin your process of evaluation, right? So part of this then is understanding the stress level within the company of why this needs to take place. Because if the head of operations burst into the office of the procurement director on Friday afternoon and said, I need this raw material on Monday or my plant is shut down, right? You need to understand what's going on there, right? There's a context between why these questions are being asked. So I think a lot of times, right, in quality and food safety, right, we just jump in and start the doing piece of things without understanding the why. Why are we doing this? Because part of what I want to follow up then as well as head of quality within a company is, okay, you go through the fire drill and you figure out all of these type of things we're talking about. It's also really important, Jose, to go back and say, why did this happen? You know, why did this crisis occur? Why did we not see this coming? Because I don't like doing this and nobody likes doing this. So what can we do to keep it from happening in the future?
And the thing, Bryan, is that, I mean, people are going through the hazard analysis, in my opinion, too lightly. You know, and actually I was recently helping a company, and when I saw the way that they describe how they are going to be determining risk, the risk assessment, you know, it was a crazy methodology. And when you use that matrix and you start reading the hazard analysis, you are going to see in that hazard analysis that some things that are actually very low risk, they're identified as a high risk. But then, because they realize that it's a low risk, the hazard analysis says, yes, this is a high risk hazard, and then they don't have controls. And say, hold on, if you say yes, why you are not indicating what is the control?
Right.
And then in other cases where the hazard is high, it was not identified as a high risk hazard. No, this is controlled by doing this and this and this. And I said, oh, be careful, because if you're controlling a hazard, you need a preventive control over there, according to the new regulation here. Absolutely. And you know what? I've been reading little by little, but rereading the new version of the Codex Alimentarius. Oh my goodness, it's copy and paste from the preventive controls regulation. There is a section that says, if you are controlling something by cleaning and sanitation, which is a sanitation preventive control, you will need to increase the frequency and make sure that that procedure is effective. Oh my goodness, that is textually the definition of a sanitation preventive control with different words. And they're not calling that as going to be part of your HACCP plan. Why? Because HACCP is applicable only to the steps of the process. And that is, in my opinion, the big mistake in the HACCP approach. Because whenever you have hazards, they must be controlled somehow with a procedure that is going to be effective for whatever is the hazard.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And Mario and Austin have a couple of questions I'll get to here in a sec. So for example, there was a client I had this year who was looking at buying a new spice supply. And they needed this because there was an issue in their supply chain. It's like, we're running low on this. So I went and looked at the hazard analysis, right? FDA has been very nice with putting together Appendix 1 and guidance around hazards, right? So I'm like, that's a good place to start. So I started looking at the hazards for this spice. And there was salmonella and these type of spice, hazards with this spice. And it's a raw spice. And this customer is a ready-to-eat client. I'm like, oh, hello, right? So if you're ready to eat.
Let me add something to what you have. Please. So I helped a company, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, and they also import some spices. And do you have the specification? Do you have COAs for these spices that you're importing? Yes. One of the hazards that I identified in their own hazard analysis was aflatoxin. And I said, well, how do you control this? Oh, it's always in the COA. They are testing for that before shipping the lot. Okay, can I see the COAs? Yes. And the COA, I saw one. It was just luck, but it was so one that aflatoxins are 22 part per billion. And I said, what? This product is adulterated. No, look. The COA says that they can go up to 30. And I said, yes, up to 30 in India. It's the regulation. In the United States, is 20. So it could be fine in India, but may not be fine here. So do you know which are the applicable requirements to your product when you import those products?
Right, exactly. Yeah. You have to look at that. And yeah, so for my spice story, right? So I'm like, there's some hazards, right? So the next question is exactly what you said. How is that controlled?
Yeah.
And we contacted this manufacturer and they're like, no, we're a small operation in Vietnam and we harvest the spice. Oh, they were not controlling the hazard. Guess what that means? I need to control the hazard and I have no way so, okay, great. Now what do I do? So do I need to send this out for processing? Do I need to get this irradiated? These type of things. Just like things that the procurement group wasn't thinking about because they're like, I need this spice and I need this right away. And
the biological hazards can be controlled with irradiation, with some kind of pasteurization of the pipe. Fine. But what about if you have the aflatoxin? No, that cannot be controlled, period. You cannot purchase that.
Right. Yep. So you have to start asking questions on the aflatoxin side is like, explain to me your processes for keeping this material dry, right? And making sure that the mold doesn't grow and you don't have aflatoxin. What do you guys do, right? Again, right? The documentation is only part of the story, right? So your COA story is perfect, right? It's like, oh, no, it's all good. We test. What are you testing for? How often do you test it? what do you do with those results, right? Show me something that's not good, right?
Ryan, you know what? You could be purchasing from a consolidator in Vietnam. That is not the farm. Can you approve those guys? No, you cannot approve. Oh, but I have a Gfsi. I'm a Global Gap. I'm whatever. I'm B or C. I don't care. I'm sorry. I cannot approve you. I need to go to the farm that grew that product and approve the farm.
Right.
This is what people still is not clear.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, I mean, if you're looking at these type of things, right, large spice companies in the US have been thinking about this problem for quite a while, right? So oregano, right? Small growers in India who bring this in from the countryside to the village, and then they dry it, and then that goes to another, right? These large companies have control of those supply chains, right? If you're buying directly, boy, you're taking a risk, right? And you need to understand that risk. And how do you mitigate that? To your point earlier, and I think it's reiterating it, this is really, really important, is the hazards must be controlled, period. You control them or they control them, but somebody's got to control the hazards. And FDA, they're going to zero in on that when they're at your facility and when they're looking at your hazard analysis, period.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep. Right.
Yep. So let's get this comments here. Mario, yep, absolutely right. Famous 80-20. Evaluation of suppliers in A, Bs, and Cs, depending on the risk. 100%.
Yeah, it's a risk assessment. Great. Absolutely. I agree, Mario.
And so Austin said, interesting to hear how this applies to a particular case about child slavery potentially being used in cocoa. A big case was just dismissed against some very large companies. But how could they better prove that they have no affiliation with slavery? Wow, that's a good one, Austin. That's a difficult question.
And you know what? Separated from the, in my opinion, Austin, I might be wrong, but separated from the fact that these are two different things, looking for slavery in the food industry and then analyzing hazards and making sure that the products are in compliance with their own specifications. Is it possible that because people is using kids, slaves in the process, the products are going to end up being adulterated? Oh yeah, I agree that there is a link between those two. Can you actually and effectively train a slave, someone that is enslaved? I don't know. I don't think so, because the culture is going to impede that thing. People are working forced. They're not working there because they love it.
Right. So social responsibility, it's a challenging topic for sure. And Austin, I wish we had better answer for you and we could wave a wand and change the world, but we do what we can. And part of this, right, is this is where free commerce and these type of things come into play, right? Where if you're able to provide incentives for companies to do this, then things are going to work out better, right? So trying to force behavior doesn't work, right? So
it's not going to work.
Yep. So a big piece then, right, of, okay, you need to approve this new supplier, right, is do they have counterparts of food safety on their side, right? So kind of like my example with this foreign company in the Philippines, right? Okay, great. I have questions. Can I talk with your food safety person? Oh, well, we don't have a food safety person. Oh, really? Well, who put together the information, right? Oh, well, I did. Okay, well, great. I guess I'm talking to you then. So then you need to start figuring out those relationships of who is doing what. And figuring out, and a big piece of this behind the scenes is you're being a detective, right? Yeah. People are telling you things, and you're trying to figure out if it's true or not.
Yep. Right? And going back to Austin comments, Austin, believe it or not, FSBP is just about food safety. So the working conditions is not part of the scope.
Yep. Now there are other documents that address. I mean, so for example, SQF has ethical sourcing modules and things of this nature as well. So I mean, it's definitely something that we're working on.
Food safety scope, Austin, it may happen.
Yep. Related topic on this that I think we need to at least throw in here, excuse me, is who's making your product, right? Are you making it yourself, or are you contracted with a co-man? And if you're contracted with a co-man, who's buying the ingredients? Are you buying and improving the ingredients, or are they buying and improving the ingredients? And sometimes it's a blend, right? So if you're using a co-manufacturer, the large commodity items that may go into your product, so water and sugar and oil and things like this, they buy because it goes into all the products they make. And that's fine, right? You need to audit them to make sure that they're doing that correctly. If you have specialty materials that you're buying yourself, so flavors or secret ingredients or what have you, right? You're responsible for that. And you need to supply that information to them for their food safety plan, so they understand it.
Yep. Now, look at these other things. I have another note here, Bryan. So, because in the United States, oh, watch out, I'm saying the United States. I know that we have a lot of people here from other countries. In the United States, the food law carries criminal consequences, okay? So, any company that is identified by the regulatory agency receiving a product that is adulterated or misbranded is committing a crime. Okay? We need to be very clear about this. And if that crime is significant, the FDA has the power to take your registration number from you, and you cannot produce anything else ever until you get that registration back, if that is an option. Okay. Now, what will happen if you miss a Gfsi audit? Let's say that you are going through, and I'm going to say SQF, it doesn't matter. You go through SQF, you fail the audit. The auditor identified that the auditor saw the red product adulteration. What is the worst thing that is going to happen? Oh, you're going to be losing your certificate for 1 year if you want to reapply to SQF, because I won't be surprised if anyone that fails an SQF audit, as soon as they know that they're not going to have that certificate for a year, they're going to start looking to become IFS, BRC, FSSC, and any other standard, and they're going back into certified state condition in 3 months, 4.
Well, and part of this too, and this is something that the standards combat all the time, is fake certificates.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Right. So how real is that certificate, right? The theme that is coming out in our talk today, which is really good. Thank you, everybody, for all this awesome feedback and conversation, is trust, right? Do you trust the counterparty that you're dealing with, right? Because you're putting an incredible importance on that relationship, right? And it gets back to what Cortland just said here. Low cost always wins. But I want to follow up on that, because it's low cost from what perspective, right? If it's just procurement, right? What's the cost per pound on this, right? Oh, check. This is why these conversations are so important. So let's say that you're buying an oil, and this oil is super cheap, right? Let's say this oil is normally $3 a pound, and someone wants to sell you this at $1 a pound. What's going on here? Right.
But hold on, but Bryan, let me interrupt you for a second. That will be an OO for quality control. For purchasing people, great. You know, this is the cheapest possible product that I'm buying.
Right. If you just take it from that perspective. So now if quality is asking these questions up front, now the conversation changes, right? So now I'm going to be saying things like this. Okay, here's what I want. I want to approve the supplier. I want to visit the location. I want to know exactly where this oil is coming from. I want samples, blah, 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 right? Oh, by the way, for every order that comes in, I'm going to pull my own samples. I am going to send it for identity testing, right? Cost. Well, guess what? Your $1 a pound oil is now $3.50 a pound. Is it really cheap? No, it's not. Right. So you have to have those arrangements, right? If a company is strictly buying on price out of the procurement group, oh boy, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble.
Because every time that you are buying cheaper, your risk, the possibility for having a recall is increasing. It's linked.
Right. And what happens when there's a recall, it's like, oh, we had a quality failure. Right? It's not we had a procurement failure. We had a quality failure.
Yep. And
So,
Cortland's comment, I remember auditing one time, and during the audit, at some point, I said, I would like to have 10 COAs for this product. And I put those COAs one right next to the other one. The results were exactly the same on all 10. The only difference was the date. Are they fake? Yes, they are.
absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. A lot of times, yeah. Then that gets back to this trust element, right? It's like, oh, you want a COA? Yeah. Sure. We'll give you a COA. Okay, yep. Great. How often do you test? We test about it once every 10 years. That's what our COA is based on. Right.
And so, you know, Bryan, the last item that I have here is quite unique. If we look at a specific requirement for each of the suppliers. So if there is a company that is making a product that is regulated by the FDA, and that product is going to be sold in the United States, okay? That means that the only person that can verify anything that is being done is a PCQI. Because the PCQI, according to 117-180, exactly in the regulation, says that this person is the one that is responsible for developing the food safety plan, implementing the food safety plan, validating the food safety plan, and then verifying the food safety plan. Mm-hmm. So if you have a supplier that actually fits into the definition, into the requirements of the preventive controls, well, who's there? Because you cannot receive anything unless it was verified by them. And the only one that can verify is the PCQI.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that person is liable, right? They are signing off. They are saying that this is safe, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Hey, Cortland, we test 1 in 1,000. Oh no, we're good. We got that covered. We're fine, right? You'll never know that unless you ask the question. And yeah, so John, very good point, right? So he's taking the conversation to this next step. He's like, wow, I mean, well, maybe procurement should be part of food safety and quality. My comment is this: it's twofold, right? Is that, and this is something I would always teach my team, is that it doesn't matter who you are in the company. Only a very small percentage of people actually report in through you, right? So even when I was head of quality at a multi-billion-dollar company, 3%, 5% maybe of the company reported in through me, right? That's 95% that do not, right? Which means I have to control outside of my direct responsibility, right? Which means you need to have the ability to influence, communicate, and understand objectives. So back to your question, how did I deal with that? I made sure that procurement understood what was in their interest, right? So okay, you have your objectives, right? As we talked about earlier on price and location and all the things that you look at, but I have requirements too. And that is a plus. It's not either or, right? We both need to be happy. And Mr. Procurement person, you will be wasting a whole lot of time if you go through all the steps of what you need to do and I reject it, right? So let's work together, and I'll give you some preliminary questions as your group is looking at new supplies of things that they can ask. If they answer no to these basic questions, there's no point going forward, right? Because they're idiots, right? They don't know how to manage food safety, and you're wasting your time, right? You want your team to focus on correct suppliers, and they're like, absolutely, right? So setting that relationship is super important. So hopefully that kind of gives some context. That's how I address it. And I think
I agree. Now look at this other thing, Bryan, which, I mean, these are things that are, happening in my mind lately. Why GFSI is asking people, hey, you need to have an organizational chart. Well, because they need to understand what is the structure of the company and which are the different positions that are in the company that will be, performing all of the activities in that food safety system. Okay, now, is that the right approach? In a company that is manufacturing food, where the most important thing is to make sure that you work all of the time under sanitary conditions and that you need to do whatever it takes in order to prevent hazard from being present. No, that's not the right approach. I will say we need to reorganize people in not an organizational chart, a food safety chart, where the one that is at the top is the one that directs and is taking the maximum responsibility of the food safety of the manufacturing site. So you're going to have for example, director of quality control at the top. Below that person, you are going to have senior management, you're going to have purchasing, you're going to have production, you're going to have cleaning and sanitation, and you're going to have pest control and whatever that program is. It's the same thing like in the food safety culture, Bryan. The food safety culture, you are going to grab, again, you go back to your human resources organizational chart and then reorganize that. And I'm going to say, okay, so who are the heads? Who are the guiding coalitions, which is a word that you hear there? Which are the teams? Who are the head of those teams? And then how these teams are structured for the food safety culture. So depending on the topic, you may have a different structure of people within the company.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And my shorthand on that is what I'm looking for is responsibility and authority must match, right? If I have the responsibility of food safety and I don't have the authority to execute it, that's big problems, right? So if I'm head of food safety for Peanut Corporation of America and I get overridden every time and product is shipped, it doesn't match, right? So that's a huge problem. Sebastian had a comment here. I remember reviewing a supplier. They had the habit of checking previous and recent reports. I understand the old report were identical. Then I checked the directory and that supplier was not listed. Oh my goodness. Good catch, Sebastian. Oh, they were not happy with their need grade. And they were an automatic black. Good for you. Good for you that you did that. So Jonathan, here in the closing moments here. So that was your comment from earlier. Does that mean you are looking for further information around something, or what? I'm not quite sure what you're looking for there. But yes, I'll comment on this. Is that one of the things that's really, really important in quality is consistency. One of the things I always teach my team members is you should be able to predict what I'm going to say on an important topic like food safety before I say it, right? You know what I'm going to say. And so if you set that up correctly, that works for other departments too, right? So if procurement is looking at something, it's already going through their brain of, okay, I don't have a GFSI certificate. I don't understand where the manufacturing plant is. If I take this to Bryan, here's what's going to pop out of his mouth. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to get that ahead of time because I don't want to have that conversation and I don't want him rolling his eyes at me, right? Yeah. The more you can do that, the better off you're going to be, right? Because you shortcut those activities.
And at that point, you are the head of the organizational chart for food safety.
Yes, absolutely. And on the org chart piece of it, why does FDA ask for org charts, right? Two reasons, right? They want to know who the warning letter goes to, if there's a warning letter, and they want to know who, if there's an issue, who they need to prosecute. That's why they want.
And now that you mentioned that, okay, let me give you another difference. Who is the one signing a food safety plan according to the preventive controls? The owner, agent, or operator in charge. And that is how exactly it is defined in the regulation. That is the only person that can sign the food safety plan. Who signs food safety plan in GFSI? The hazard coordinator, the hazard team leader, the SQF practitioner, you name it. Well, it's not the same.
Gotcha. Wow, time rolled on this. Wow, what a fun topic, right? So obviously, right, lots of heated opinions, lots of different ideas around this, right? This is huge, right? And because this is an observation in food safety, right? Is when problems occur, right? The hidden skeletons come up, right? Because for years and years and years, the food safety, the supply chain, everything's rocking and rolling along, and all of a sudden, right, everything's falling apart. And the importance of this is becoming more and more clear, right? And one of the things that I always emphasize, right, is good processes make things go faster, not slower, right?
Yep.
So if you have good processes in place, it's going to help you find good suppliers. It's going to help you find the right price. It's going to help you find reliable people, right? Trust. Documents are not trust, right? As we've seen in this comment here, we could probably go on all day with people who have stories of documentation that was fake or falsified or misrepresented. Who knows what, right? It's our job to be those detectives, right, with our magnifying glass, figuring out whether it's true or not. And when we have audits, right, that's what a good auditor does, right, is they are gauging their level of trust with you. And to your point earlier, Jose, if that low of trust with an auditor is low, they're going to ask a question and say, oh, I'd like to see this document. Oh, sure. And I would also like 10 random pieces of evidence that I'm going to pull to see if you're telling me the truth, right? So that standard goes up. So hopefully everybody, this was helpful. And in the standpoint of, again, right, the central message here is if you work in food safety and quality, it's a gigantic mistake to think that you just live in that box. You do not, right? You are there to manage this for the company, right? For every activity within the company. If you're working in this field, you're one of the few agents within a company who has the ability to go and poke your nose into a whole bunch of stuff, right? And it's your moral responsibility to do that, right? To work with R&D and legal and executives and operations and procurement and right, every group in the company has a responsibility in this. And it's your job to put the systems in place and to educate, right? And say, this is why we do this. Not, here's what I say to do, and 21.11 subpart B, C, what says you must do this. No, that's not going to convince anybody, right? This is why we do these things. So but I'm gonna be charged for the rest of the day. This was great. This was a great conversation. Thank you, everybody. Right, and part of this, right, is as a closing comment, and I'll swing it back over to you, Jose. Is there's more than one way to figure this out, right? We're just giving you what we have seen and what we have found to be best practices, right? That's what food safety development's all about: is learning from different groups and picking that information and figuring out what is best in your context. Right. And being able to explain it to other people.
For closing, Bryan, I'm going to use an example. Okay. So look at this. You approve suppliers, assuming that there is a hazard in that ingredient, you approve suppliers according to the FDA by checking if they are in compliance with the regulation applicable to them and making sure that they produce products that are safe and clean. Fine. On the other side, for GFSI, you are going to be approving suppliers if they are GFSI. So most likely, people are going to send them typically a questionnaire and then requesting a copy of the certificate. And basically, that's about it. Okay. The issue is that in HACCP, in the HACCP approach, which is required by GFSI, okay? GFSI saying, oh, you need to be in compliance with the food safety laws and regulation in your country, but you need to have a HACCP program. In HACCP, if you take the approach straight as it was written, you can only set up controls in any of the steps of your flowchart. Okay? And the difference between preventive controls and HACCP is that in preventive controls, you may set up preventive controls outside of the steps of the flowchart. So because of that, it is possible that you identify, oh, do you have a GFSI certification? Yes, this is my certificate. And if we go online, we may eventually identify that, that certificate is valid. It's real. The on-site website with a database of GFSI standard says that, this is the right one. However, that company, and I'm citing an example, I'm not, of course, no name, no nothing, but that company was audited 3 months after they received an excellent. In an SQF audit, they were visited by the FDA and they received a warning letter.
Wow.
And you're going to say, what? How's that possible? You got a 96 in GFSI in SQF. How is that possible that you're going to get a warning letter from the FDA? Oh, yes. Because according to the FDA, if you identify a hazard in your environment, you are going to be controlling that with one preventive control. You don't have that in HACCP. In HACCP, you control that by cleaning and sanitation. Mm-hmm. So guess what? They don't match. Now, I can tell you another example. In my investigation, I was searching for a supplier, and there is nothing in the FDA website. So I cannot determine if they have recalls, if they were inspected, if they have any refusal, or I don't know, something indicating that they are not in compliance with the regulation. Now, I went to the SQF website, and I searched for information about that company. And that company got the certification audit, got a comply. So 6 months after that, they need to go again through another audit. They went through that audit, and for the next 3 years, they got good. And the last 5 audits were comply, all of them. Mm. Are you going to, knowing what we know, are you going to approve that supplier? Of course not.
Right.
Because you cannot have 5 audits in sequence, having a comply. You know that you're not doing a good job. It is evident.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. Again, James doesn't like our chat. That's
okay.
That's fine. Sorry.
Fine.
Anyway. Good. Guess what, James? You have earned a block. There you go. You're out of there. All right. So cool. Next week, we're back with the next food safety chat, which will not be lame. So we will be back here next Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern. And Jill Stuber is our guest next week. So food safety coach.
Oh,
Jill
great. Hey, hello to Jill.
Yeah. So hopefully we've given some good insight here into a topic that is, a lot of activity in this. It takes up a lot of our time in food safety for sure. Hopefully been able to help. And of course, Jose, I love having you on as a guest. Thank you, my friend. It's been amazing. Your insights are always the best. So of course, Jose's email is here. Mine is as well. Any questions or any follow-ups of what you guys are looking for? Happy to do it. So everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next Friday.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.